Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Christian Recorder Dialogues. We are indeed excited to have with us today one of the general officers of the church as we honor her in her retirement from service as a general officer. Now, she's not going anywhere, but she has dutifully served 12 years as the Executive Director of Research and Scholarship. So today we are here to spotlight the Reverend Dr. Teresa Fry Brown. Dr. Fry Brown, welcome to the Christian Recorder Dialogues. Thank you for being here with us.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, we are excited, and this is our tradition. We invite everyone who is watching this to put your everything in the chat that you'd like. Tell us about, where you're coming from, your bishop, your district. Y'all know the routine. Dr. Fry Brown, you have been a stalwart around this church for many, many years. And many of us know you in many different capacities. But this time, it's a time for us to honor you, reflect, and celebrate your legacy and the work you've done, the work you'll be continuing to do. So the first question that I want to ask you is, you are the Reverend Dr. Teresa Fry Brown, or Teresa Fry Brown, PhD. I like that one better for selfish reasons. But Dr. T, tell us about your call to ministry, because before anything else, you are a clergy person, an ordained clergy person. So tell us about where you were called and how you were called.
Thank you. I have been, it's about 43 years ago, actually. I was working at Shorter AME Church in Denver, Colorado. I was choir director, Christian education director. I was assisting Reverend J. Langston Boyd. It wasn't an assistant pastor role, as they call it now, executive pastor, but I was doing those kinds of things. And my mother was ill, and I just had my child, Veronica Perry. And I was going to Kansas City in order to make sure that my 52-year-old mother would be admitted into a care facility. And I'm on the plane, and I don't know what it was, but there was some kind, it wasn't a loud voice or anything like that, but there was this conversation I was having in my head, and God saying, you have to do more. And so I'm arguing that I've done so much already. What more can I do? This is what I'm supposed to do. I was a speech language pathologist. I was operating Martin Luther homes in Denver, worked with multiply handicapped children, had my master's. I thought that'd be enough. And then God said, I need you to teach, preach, and write. And that was the order. Teach, preach. And I thought, no, when you're called to preach, you're called to preach, you're called to pastor. God said, teach, preach, and write. So I get back from Kansas City after all those personal things with my mother and talked to J. Langston Boyd. And he said, daughter, I don't understand. And I've never had a woman answer the call to preach, so I need you to go away. So he sent me away for a year to pray, and I kept doing the things at the church. But my entire life, my mother told me, my grandmother actually at that time, because my mother wasn't able to tell me this, my grandmother said whenever I got ready to sing, I would always say something. So it was that early evangelist kind of style. And I was teaching Sunday school, those kinds of things. And so that, regardless of what the definition of a call to preach is in the church, God said, teach, preach, and write. And that's what I've been able to do. I've been teaching for 52 years, and I've been in ministry for 43 years.
Wow. So let's take that a step further. So you accepted your call to ministry, but by that point, you were a speech pathologist. You were working somewhere else, but you had not intended on pursuing a PhD. Or was that something that was in your mind?
No, in fact, when I was expecting Veronica, I was in my third year of law school. And so what I wanted to do, because when I was younger, Black women weren't being admitted to law school, was to go to law school. So I'd already had my master's in speech pathology and audiology, but I wanted to go to law school. And then it became too much traveling from Denver to Boulder. And so I dropped out of law school my third year. And so I had I didn't anticipate going to school for a master's of divinity, and a PhD was, the only time I was going to work on a PhD was when I was maybe finished my first master's, and I was admitted to Purdue to work on a PhD in speech pathology and audiology. My mother was sick, and so I had to drop out of that program because I had to come back as the second oldest and the oldest daughter to take care of family.
Wow. Wow, because I know when I started doing my PhD, you talked to me about the fact that a PhD is also a calling as well. So you were doubly called. You were called to the ministry, and you were called to this ministry, not to pastor, but to teach. So can you tell us a little bit about how your academic journey began?
My academic journey, I think when other people were pretending to preach when they were children, I was teaching classes. And there were
Hmm.
teachers all through my family, even though my uncles thought that's the only thing black women can do, you have to do something else. But I was always the teacher. And so uh, whether it was religious education, as we call it now, or doing workshops, because I had been a speech language pathologist, I started doing workshops in Denver with pastors on preaching, and started working at the seminary on preaching. And then it was like, oh, I can do this. And over the years, what I've come to understand is my classroom is my congregation. I've been fortunate enough to teach at between Iliff and Candler. I'll be at Candler next week. By the 1st of September, I'll be there 30 years. Uh, about 1,500, 1,600 students that became pastors. And so it is this idea about working with pastors and activists and everything else that have some kind of religious overtone, and there are 43 different denominations where I am, that this is, uh, when Wesley talks about the world being the parish, the classroom is my parish. Whether it's in
Wow.
physically in the academy, doing what I do, not only at Candler, but being able to travel worldwide and teach, being able to lecture in Germany and Brazil and France and places like that, and to write, because my reach is further with being able to write books, to write articles, to do commentaries, to go to guilds and talk to people, because I believe that God blesses the mind and the heart, and that is what I'm supposed to do, is to help people um, learn how to relate, to talk, to share what God has placed in them, and to broaden what we think teach, preach, and write is.
Wow, wow. So, we've talked about how you began your academic journey, and you still, you are a senior academic, well beloved and well respected. And you are the Bandy Professor of Teaching at Candler, as well as, correct me if I'm wrong, the Associate Vice Provost of Graduate Studies.
Uh,
Um,
the Bandy Professor of Preaching and the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. It's a long
Associate
title.
Dean for Academic Affairs.
In
Okay,
different places, I think Provost it's called some other places, but because
okay.
we're a seminary associated with a Research One university, so we have these different kind of levels. But I'm the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs. It's my third year doing that. And so inside the academy, I've done this where I'm working with advising students and developing classes and working with faculty on pedagogy, ways of teaching. I also have worked in what we call guilds with the American Academy of Religion for years, the Society for Study of Black Religion. I was president of the Academy of Homiletics. The Bandy professorship came to me in 2015, and it is looked at as the premier chair in preaching. And no one, not even me, but I know God, understood that a black woman would ever be in this position or any of the
Mm.
positions. Entering the academy, I taught at Iliff, but I became the third black woman uh, to attain full professorship at Emory, who up until 1964 didn't even let us on campus. And so it's that kind of, I know it's my call, because God keeps opening doors where someone has said you will not be. You
Wow.
cannot be because of who you are. And yes, that's been very important in the academy. And so I try to encourage younger, particularly Black scholars like yourself, uh, that don't let the structures, the institutions say what you cannot do. Use what you have and do it anyway. And there are
I,
consequences for that.
I remember, and we'll talk about this at some point in the interview, I hope, at the last AME Scholars meeting you held in this May. One of the things that you mentioned, and one of the things that we talked about was, how you can be a scholar in the church with the Holy Spirit, and how scholarship can influence, and how you can be a scholar in academia and still be a Christian, and how you should not be separating those two. And that's something that I really took to heart, and that you basically are emblematic of.
Yes, I think that and now I'm talking about Black religiosity, Black church, bought into this myth that when one is a person of faith, then their brain takes a vacation.
Mm-hmm,
That
mm-hmm.
we become lemmings and we just follow whatever's said. But we forget the Logos is about the mind. And so God appreciates the life of the mind. And I've had discussions with people who say people that are working on PhDs don't love the Lord, they don't go to church. In what I was able to discover since we started pulling this information together robustly in 2014 when we had the first Scholars Conference, about 95% of the AME scholars that I have on record are also active in church. Some of them are pastoring, they're on somebody's staff, they represent the AME Church well, that other denominations are using our intellectual capacities. And so it became really important to me that the church understood we are the people that are shaping theological education. We are the people who are writing the books. We are the people that are at the top of our guilds. And so I needed people to understand, and this was part of, I think, the teach, preach, and write thing that God gave me, is to make sure that we celebrate our own, that we use our own resources. And so I've been able to have 3 scholars conferences, and I just wanted people, it was research and scholarship. They had the 3 scholars conferences. They were at Emory because I worked there and I got a deal to have it there. And it's easier to get in and out of Atlanta. But so we always have one, we have one set up, not under research and scholarship, but under Thinking Church, the power of church, which is a separate piece that I set up through Lilly Grant that will be able to continue those. And with those, setting up the scholars group in the AME Church, we were the first denomination to have a formal scholars group. And so people from the United Methodist Church called me, how can we do this? I'm working with some other denominations about how can we set up a group of scholars, whether they had departments or not, to actually go and say, how many scholars do you have? How many PhDs? How many DMins? How many other terminal degrees? So that we understand that we don't have to buy into societal thought that Blacks have small brains, that we can't think, that we don't write. And that's part of my passion too, is to celebrate the fullness of who God has made us. And that having a PhD does not mean that you talk above people. It means that you're in conversation and can bring some resources, but also celebrate the resources of other people in the church. So just like I think preachers should be able to talk to anybody in the pews, a scholar should be able to talk with anybody in the pews and be able to be multilinguistic, being able to talk in academies when you have to, but also be able to talk in your vernacular when you need to, so that everybody can understand what's out there and where we can go and how beautiful. We talk about beautiful are the feet all the time. I would love to have a text that says beautiful is the mind, because I believe in the life of the mind. I believe in the life of the mind.
So, Dr. T, with all these things you've done in this academic career and how you've blended your academic vocation with your pastoral vocation to be a teacher, and we sometimes forget that Jesus' ministry wasn't just about healing the sick, wasn't just about evangelism. He was a master teacher. That is a ministerial call and a gift. What would give us, one of the, you've shared some highlights, but like if you would want to be remembered for 1 or 2 things from this career of yours, can you give me a highlight that just, to this is the Dr. Fry Brown legacy?
Okay. that threw me right off. So if I start slinging, it's not falling out, you'll understand. Number 1, in ministry, there were thousands of women before me that entered ministry. The path is not easy, but I would love for women and men who follow me to understand that be true to your call and face the consequences when structures don't understand what your call is, but do it anyway. And to also in the academy, I've had the privilege of personally shepherding 10 PhD students through at Candler alone, and worked on many DMin things. It is making way for somebody to follow you. And so I usually say to my students, I'm going to try to help you, but if you don't listen, don't say that you know me. But I've seen some things and I know some things, and I want to make sure that you um, leave something for someone else, to know when to leave the stage, to know when to support from behind. Like people that are on my staff in research and scholarship have wonderful abilities that I celebrate all the time. And so the way I work, the way I teach, and the way that I also do this academic thing is I don't have to be at the forefront all the time. It is to help build what comes after me, what is right now, to look at Carol James, who's a lay person who loves AME history, and giving her carte blanche to study. And Cynthia McDonald, who does wonderful things with grants and also loves history. It's letting her do what she does best. It's my sister, Rochelle Fry Skinner, who is now the YPD director, who is an organizer and an event planner par excellence, so I don't have to do a thing. My daughter, Veronica Perry, who keeps my schedule, but also does education. So she helps us with doing how we're going to teach what we're teaching. My niece, Rakisha, is a psychologist. So she helps us understand why people might reject something and what other people are going to step into. Kim Dethridge, who's a lawyer, but also is working on the AME review. Those are the kind, and Martinique Mix, who just does all things and loves history. It is for me to recognize that I have to surround myself with people in the church or the academy that not help me look good, but get the job done. So I carry the title, but other people are the ones that work. And so I'm not a micromanager. My job is to be a support system, to be the idea person, and they come in and do the work for me, and to be able to build alliances with people across the church. So this thing that we call research and scholarship works, that I build alliances, the academy, all these other people, so that we can work, so there's something left. Because I don't believe in somebody being a leader, the leader leaves and everything collapses. So
Wow. And I guess being remembered for making way for others to shine their gifts is not a bad thing to be. We're going to go to our commercial, and then we'll come back and dig a little bit more into your work as general officer.
Thank you.
In a world where the echoes of history shape our present, the AME Church stands as a beacon of faith, culture, and hope. My mission goes beyond mere documentation. It is a call to action. It is about using the stories and wisdom of our ancestors as a visionary roadmap to harness the power of our past for a brighter future. My vision as your next historiographer is to break barriers together through continued education while digitizing the AME Review. Next, our research hub will become the heart of discovery, preserving and using our stories while nurturing the next generation. Lastly, I will establish a development team to identify opportunities to fund this work and utilize our expertise to provide resources to local churches. I will strive not only to break barriers, but to build bridges of collaboration. As the think tank of the AME Church, we will empower scholars and leaders to shape a world where faith, history, and scholarship intersect, encouraging exploration, understanding, and growth. My name is Dr. Cynthia Parnell McDonald, number 390, and I solicit your vote to become the 15th historiographer of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. History now more than ever.
All right, and we're back. So, Dr. Fry Brown, you are a general officer in this church, and you, but that is something that is also its own unique calling. So, tell us what motivated you to assume this role in the AME Church.
My people think that because I teach preaching, that's my background. My PhD is in history, sociology, ethics, and social transformation. I needed a job. That's why I'm teaching preaching. So I was drawn to the AME Church from the Baptist Church because I grew up National, then Progressive Baptist. Um, I was drawn because of the rich history of the church, because of the social activism of the church, because of the way in which from Richard and Flora and Sarah forward, how we learned to change society by interacting with people that didn't necessarily look like us, but build bridges. And I was just enamored with it. I was down the street from Shorter AME Church, and I'd go work with Reverend Boyd, and he was doing all those things that had my heart. And then I started investigating the church, and I thought, this may be where I need to be. That's how I came to the AME Church. And so at first I wanted to serve the church past the local church. And I thought that I had some gifts to bring to the church. And so originally, and I was looking at running for Christian education, and that didn't quite work out. So I backed off of that. But then I started writing and reading even more. And when the position was going to be open, I had a long talk with God, because I was like, I don't do that kind of politics. I'm a politician. I can do that, but I do that kind of politics. But God said, do it anyway. And so even with distractors, I went ahead and said, okay, I'm offering myself to serve the church, because I can see some things that I can bring to the table that can enhance already 13 other people work that they've done. And what I was bringing was not only my gifts and skills, but I'm the first ordained woman general officer. And I knew I would be the only one. And so we went through the process, we went through the process in 12, and I was shocked that I was elected because I did some different things. I believe in Bishop Sarah told me to be personable, be myself, and that's what I had to do. And so in the general office, they had combined historiographer, research and scholarship, and the AME review. I was already an author. I thought I could do the AME review. Research and scholarship, we've already talked about what I could do with scholarship. And the history piece was there. And so I was already working with historiographers in the United Methodist Church. So I knew I could bring something to the table. And this combination fit what my doctoral work actually was. And so it was like God said, hey, I'm moving you here now. We're going to do this. And I had this misgiving, almost like when I went into ministry and I was told I couldn't be in the choir anymore, that moving into this general officer thing was like, you're not going to be able to do the stuff you've done all these years on the local church level of doing supply, of preaching, of doing these other kinds of things. But God said, I got this. So general officer, as a person, as a department, and I think that people underestimate general officers. And I can say that because I'm going to retire. So who's going to tell me I'm wrong?
That's okay. That's okay. You can say that here. We do that. Please, by all means, continue.
I think that we're not middle managers. We run that. When we talk about a connection, the general offices are the connection, the connective tissue that keep things moving. And so we may not be over districts, but we do a lot of work that I think sometimes that I know after 12 years it's overlooked, that it's more than us marching in with robes behind or in front of the bishops. It is day to day with minimal resources often. I reviewed this. Dr. Johnny Barber helped me with this when I was elected. What alone, knowing what I do, being in the academy, what I do alone, I should be paid $1 million a year because of we are expected to produce excellence. So I'll just talk about my department. We're expected to produce this journal when people are saying, I don't want to write anymore. We're expected to do a scholarly journal when people are being told, as we talked earlier, people with brains, people with degrees don't love the church. We're expected to keep artifacts and historiography kinds of information when people want to keep it to themselves. or sell it to the highest bidder, as some people have done, or give it to local libraries. And then still people get upset when you can't find their great uncle, when that's not what we do. Uh, when we are supposed to balance all of the scholarship and the research interests of the church with minimal, as women in ministry said, bricks without straw. And so I would not give anything, as the saying goes, for my journey right now. I think that I work with some amazing people that are doing a lot of amazing work. And if I wanted to leave anything, it would be respect and support. Maybe I want to flip that. Support the general officers. Uh, I was at some meeting a couple of months ago, and people were railing about general officers, and they didn't even know what general officers were. And what I found these 12 years is when I show up, people don't think I'm a general officer because they're all supposed to be men, but they don't know what we do. And I think that being now the president of the council, trying to be a PR person for general officers, but also to coordinate some really disparate kinds of personalities sometime, and some frustration sometime, but also genuine support for each other, has been the hallmark of these last 3 years as president of the council, to make sure that it's more than about a seat someplace or a robe. It's important to me that the work, the investment in time, the love of the church, the travel, all these kinds of things, is at least respected and not overlooked. That we're not clumped in because we're elected by the whole church, that we're not clumped in with other groups that are elected in a different way, that we are an important contingent of the church. Yes, more important than I think people think we are. And I don't mean important like over. I mean part of what helps the church to function comes from general offices. Social historically, we've had general officers like the late Bishop Beelan, general officers who went on to do some other kind of work, general officers that have produced things that other denominations are using all the time, general officers that are on international ecumenical kinds of councils that represent the church wherever they are, and represent the church in the work that they do inside and outside of the church. And that's been something that I really, really, really want. You don't have to bow and kiss rings. You don't have to like us, but just recognize that we do work, that this is not a titular kind of position, that there's a lot of work that we do above and beyond what is listed in the discipline.
Wow. All I can say is ditto, and thank you for saying that. We're going to record that snippet and play that during the budget discussion of the next general conference. But in your in your particular department, though, you inherited some challenges when you came in, and you've left the department in a very special way. And we've talked about this. My godmother, Jamie Coleman Williams, was editor of the AME Review, and I remember at the general conference when she had when there was a dinner, and she was like, "You need to come to this dinner," and I was like, "What am I coming to this dinner for? The free food?" And it was you and her and Donna Williams talking, and just looking over your 12 years in this department, from what you inherited to where you are now. Tell us, what are some of the highlights there that you leave for us?
Dr. Jamie Coleman Williams, my muse, my mentor, told me that one of the best skills I could have as a general officer was to listen. She taught me in sitting next to her that I don't have to talk all the time. If I just listen to what's around me, I will know what's going on in the church. I will know how to navigate the church. And I thank her and her saint in memory for that. I came in, and there were there were a few items, let me put it that way, for me to work with. And it was through her counsel and support of other people that we were able to build on what was there when we got there, and to catch up the review at that particular point in time, because it's an ongoing struggle to get people to write. It's an ongoing struggle to get people to write. We were able to gather, as we've talked before, a real strong base of scholars and people who had left the AME Church because they didn't think their skills were being appreciated to come back and give us another try. We were able at the General Conference, as you remember, in 2016, for the first time to have scholars present little 5-minute things across disciplines. And that really said a lot about the openness of the church to the possibility of recognizing scholarship. And what it did for the scholars is to let them love the church again, which is why we've been having these scholars conferences every year, is to let them know that they're being seen, to let them know that as a church, as a denomination, they have some modicum of value. And like I said with general officers, they don't want to wear a star or have a crown. They just want to know that the work that God has placed on their hearts is in some little way recognized, in some little way appreciated. These 12 years have been, COVID notwithstanding, has been mountaintop and deep valley.
Mm.
It has been sometimes really well supported and sometimes not. The work that I'm doing with the Compelling Preaching Grant was not to destroy anything, but to bring some more resources to bear to help more people. And so it's been kind of spotty support of that, but we're going to work it through. We have 2 more years on the grant. We're going to work it through to make sure that people receive resources. I think that the highlights were the 2016 presentation of 7 scholars for 5 minutes each to stand before the General Conference and say, this is what I'm working on. This is where we are. That to me did it. The way in which, when we were able to publish D-Men thesis from pain, and people felt good about somebody recognizing the work they had done those 3, 4, 5 years, was another highlight of that. I preach around the world, and the times that I've been able to, I preach other denominations more than I do in the AME Church, let me put it that way. But I still, when I'm called to do these conferences, whether it's 5 people or 10,000 people or 12,000 people, people still recognize that I'm part of the AME Church and the legacy of the AME Church. And that's still important to me, that the church of Richard, Flora, and Sarah, because I have to say you can't leave people out, has so much they can do. And sometimes it's like in your family, not recognizing the very people in your family that can keep the legacy going, the very people in the family that are doing the grunt work, that make the entire family look like they know what they're doing. That becomes critically important. So the things that were absent when I started, Dr. Jamie said, do the work. The things that I didn't find that I thought I was going to find, Dr. Jamie said, do the work. She and I commiserated about a lot of things, but she said, Teresa, you are supposed to do what God tells you to do in this. And she used to always say, as you know, I'm not going to be here, but I need you to learn these things. I need you to know the church needs you even when they say they don't. And that's what I found to be true these 12 years, these 40 some years in ministry, is even when you don't I don't look for pats on the back. I don't look for accolades. I look for, am I doing the work that I was called to do, to teach, preach, and write? Am I, even when people say ugly things to me, even when I have to preach from the floor, even when I offer some way for us to do better things with historiography and other things and I'm turned away, or people are reluctant, let me put it that way, to support gathering artifacts, I still have to do the work. The work has to go on. And as I say to my students, nobody told me the road would be easy. So on the other side of this particular office, I still have work to do that I could do in other ways and other places, probably with some other kind of grant money that's in the name of my own LLC. But I still think there's a lot we can do in archival work. There's a lot we can do in scholarship. There's a lot we can do in publication. And so the work goes on. And so I thank Dr. Jamie for telling me, even when I wanted to walk away after the first year, after the first month, as a matter of fact, even when I wanted to walk away from the first month, it was her saying, and my family saying, just do the work.
Wow. Well, we're going to take another commercial break. Then we're going to kind of come back to talk a little bit more about, your next steps and what you're going to do now that this work you've committed your heart to will be done.
Okay.
Hello, and God's blessings to you all. My name is Reverend Tyranda House Burgess, and I thank you for allowing me a few moments of your time. In 1991, on the fourth Sunday in March, I stood in the pulpit of Payne Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and I preached my trial sermon. My prayer on that day was, God, use me. I'm available to you. And as I stand here today, 31 years later, that is still my prayer. Lord, use me. I'm available to you. In the last 31 years, I've been privileged to serve God, my community, and my local church in so many ways. I've worked alongside my wonderful husband, Reverend Lish Burgess Jr. He is my partner in life and in ministry, and together we have sought to multiply the impact of our call to ministry and to marriage. I've been blessed beyond my wildest dreams to be able to serve God on the presiding elder district level, on the Episcopal district level, and on the connectional level in our church, and even through the general board of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I'm grateful for every opportunity to serve the church that I love. Over these 31 years, God guided me through a career in corporate America that allowed me to learn the skills and the importance of effective administration. I've had the privilege of learning the corporate world in order to bring those skills and insights back into our local congregations. And our churches have truly benefited from that. I've had the opportunity to serve 6 extraordinary congregations in our connection. It is there that I've been able to bring the administrative gifts that God has blessed me with to share in ministry. I've had the pleasure of aiding in the process of purchasing buildings, paying off debt, increasing giving, and lifting up churches. I believe that every experience that God brings us through, He brings us through it for us to learn a lesson. When we apply the lessons that God takes us through, the church, the people, and the body of Christ all benefit. Whether it's through testimony, systems, actions, behavior toward one another, we all benefit from the lessons that God takes us through. That is why 31 years later, I'm still declaring, Lord, wherever you need me to serve, whatever you need me to do, I'm available to you. Use me, Lord. Our church and our world are changing faster than ever before. And I believe God is not calling us to simply keep up or to react to the changes that are around us. But God is calling us to serve the present age in order to build a stronger future. We do that by being proactive, agile, and visionary in the things of God and the work that God has called us to do. Today, I'm offering myself as a candidate for the General Secretary, Chief Information Officer of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. It is my sincere prayer and hope that you will pray for me, pray with me, and support me for this new role. Join me in building a brighter tomorrow, and let's start today.
And we're back, and we are indeed thankful to our sponsors for this broadcast who allow us to continue bringing quality programming to you in the AME Church. Dr. T, you truly have been a mentor and a treasure trove of wisdom, and I hope that the people in this broadcast have seen that wisdom was bequeathed to you and you are sharing it with others, and hopefully others will be able to share this wisdom that you have. So, Dr. T, I want to ask, and let's go back to the second, for those who are academics who want to share with the AME Church and give their talents to the AME Church, what are some advice that you have for them?
So many of the persons who are in the academy, working in the church, are doing this on small scales, week to week in their church, teaching Bible studies. Some of our, I think about Shively Smith,
Mm-hmm.
who at BU is also on the History Channel. Raquel Letzen, who does her own ministry and she focuses on lay people, AME. I try to make sure that there are book lists. And what I've been doing is resourcing. Whenever somebody asks me about a book in a particular discipline, I always give Black authors, but I give AME authors. So to go to their annual conferences, since many of them are also ordained, and make sure there's a book table. Anne-Marie Mingo is doing this all over the place. To be able to engage with people, I am starting to do a consulting work with the AME Zion Church, where people can come on for half an hour and talk with me about preaching. But I've also been doing some things through our compelling preaching grant, so people can even come in and ask our scholars, how do I do things about ethics? And it doesn't cost the people anything for that particular grant proposal. But I think the academics have been there, and sometimes they hide their light under bush because they think that people are going to think they're trying to be bigger than they are. So I encourage the scholars to not sit in the back of the church, but to be involved in, most of them because they're teaching or have several jobs because they're adjuncts or what have you, is to share your gifts a little bit at a time. Talk with your pastors to see if they even know that you have a book or an article that might be shared with the congregation. And to also have some what do we call them? Teaching, where we sit down over coffee or lunch or whatever, and just have some conversation about whatever topic people want to talk about. I think that's one of the way for us to go both directions. Many of us have taught at some of our schools. We're working with students at our schools. I get calls all the time to, can you help me with this dissertation or with this DMin project? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you review something? Those are the kinds of things that scholars do. And I think that the church needs to allow, just like we have chaplains that are special, maybe we need to work toward allowing, not for voting purposes, but allowing, what the 5th District allowed me to do was to make a report at annual conference about what I was doing. So I would go back to the 5th District for my annual conference in the Desert Mountain conference, and I would say, so I taught this many students, these are the books I'm writing, these are those kinds of things. And also some of our scholars on boards of examiners. I think that becomes critically important because I think sometimes the church uses too much scholarship that doesn't look like us when we have the scholars doing the work that can do culturally relevant kinds of discussions. It's kind of like always going to someone who may sound good, but doesn't know anything about the AME Church or anything about being Black to come and present at a conference. Why not use your own people? So that's it. It goes both ways. It's not just, the scholars are not just sitting there panting, waiting to be let in. The church has to recognize that they have people that, again, are part of the life of the mind. And there are different ways to be part of the life of the mind. We've been working, as you were at the last scholars conference, about the definition of scholars. It doesn't mean some erudite person over here that knows nothing about life. It's someone that has a particular way that they studied what they've studied, and how can we meet together. So what I've done purposefully when we have the scholars conferences is to have persons with different kinds of degrees or without degrees, or have practical experience. So we have theory and practice together, so we learn from each other. That's the purpose of those conferences, so that somebody doesn't have to say, well, you got a PhD, so you don't love the church. You got a DMin and practice. No, put it together, because we have to talk through these things and tear down these sociological constructs that keep us in different kinds of areas instead of meeting together. So.
Mm, wow. I've struggled myself with this because working here and being a lay person, being an academic, and then being in the church, it's been a unique issue. Even though some would say I follow my godmother's footsteps, it's I can't tell you the times where I've been in the church place, and because of three letters after my name, I get looked at, or people immediately think I'm trying to talk down or do something when I'm simply trying to share what I know. And on the flip side, it's amazing how we love titles and degrees, but we don't want to listen to the people who earned them and what they've done and what they said. And I know we're not going to get to that on this broadcast, but especially with regards to the committee that you've been charged with regarding human sexuality, it's interesting how we have these discussions with people, and once you've done the research and the scholarship, and when the scholars tell you this is what the research says, all of a sudden, well, that we don't want to listen to that. We don't want to pay attention to that.
I think that not just in that subject, but in all subjects, there's this false dichotomy about faith and education.
Mm-hmm.
So we're perpetuating the myth of enslaved people by our enslavers, that we did not have a brain, that we're 3/5 of a person, and that if you studied something, you're trying to be up here. When the person in the 21st century who was looked at as the dean of all preachers studied the classics. Gardner Taylor studied the classics, and he knew how to marry studying those classics with reading the room. So I say that people read the room. And I think we're being penalized sometimes because my presence should not be a critique of who you are.
Mm.
So I also have to understand that going into the room, I'm not responsible for you not going to class. I used to apologize. I used to apologize in the church for having a degree. And one night, God said, Teresa Lynn, I made a way for you to study that. So now I need you to stop apologizing for. I would not tell people that I had a PhD. I wouldn't tell people I'm in law school. And I was just told last week, why didn't you tell people we're in law school? Because somebody's going to say I'm trying to be extra without understanding. I'm just using the gift that God gave me, like your preaching or pastoring is a gift that God gave you. So why do I have to apologize for God's gifting me with something? And so why are we, in some instances, perpetuating a myth of anti-intellectualism that we critique everybody else for by saying that because somebody has a degree, they don't love God? Now, at the same time, scholars need to learn how to put what they have learned into, not talking down to, but to be able, as I said earlier, to be multilingual. So when I was in speech language, when I was operating a speech and hearing program, speech language program in Missouri, and I would go talk to parents. I taught anatomy, physiology, endocrinology, and neurology. And so I would go talk to parents. I knew all the language. I knew all the body. I knew all the innervation. I knew all those kinds of things. But when I went to talk to parents, I had to say, you're doing the same thing I'm teaching you. I'm using different language. So what is the language that I need to use now to get this point across to you? So I had an obligation to go to the vernacular of that parent that's teaching the child to go, mum, mum, mum. And I'm talking about bilabial compression, right? And so I knew I couldn't say bilabial because that wasn't their language. I knew it. It didn't mean I left it. It means that now I have to find a language. That's what Raquel does well. Raquel Letson does well when she teaches Bible study, is that she knows the history, she knows the text, but she puts it in the language so that people can use it. And that's been a challenge, both from people with degrees and people without degrees. So because sometimes people without degrees try to use language that doesn't fit. So we have to, how do we communicate? To me, it comes down to communication. That's essential for the academy and the church and the academy. Years and years and years and years and years ago in the late 80s, James Cone and Jeremiah Wright would have meetings at Union on the church and the academy. They were facing the same thing in 1987. They were facing that there's this false dichotomy of church and academy when we understand the sacred and the secular are not split in Black church. And so we need to stop. Sometimes I just want to say, just stop it. Just stop it. Just appreciate the gifts God has given everybody. Because I think that my grandmother was the best theologian ever. And my grandmother had school in her house because of when she was born. And she still knew, she knew concepts. That's what Mother Wit and Womanist Discourse about. She knew content, but she didn't use the labels that I use. So I had to listen to her and think, oh, that's what that is. That's how Black theology was built. That's how womanism is built. That's how faith is built. By watching people practically do what they're doing. And I have the language for it, so I can write about it. But I need to respect you and you need to respect me, or we're going to kill each other. And people outside the church say, you know, Black people can't think. Black people are, Simone Biles, Black people are naturally athletic, but they never talk about us thinking. We're perpetuating that in the church. We are thinking people, which is why I had the Power of the Thinking Church. We are thinking people. We approach the same information differently with different language. All we're looking for is how we can work together to have a different result. So you have to take what I've learned in school, what you learn on the ground, what you learn in a DMin pro, and let's put it together and the church can grow. But if we keep putting up these barriers and saying, go out and research that, but I don't have time to hear what you researched, or I'm watching you do something and I can analyze what you are doing, but I'm not going to talk to you about what I'm watching. I'm going to, when I listen to preachers, I know all the words that I've written about preaching, but when I sit down and talk to you, I'm going to say, okay, so when you said this, this is what I saw. What did you mean by that? We are not, we're communicating past each, we're not even communicating. We're talking past each other in scholarship in the church. We're talking, and we have one goal, and that is for the edification of the minds for God, not for somebody's position or title. So yes, again, I have to do the work, even when I know people don't want to hear it. To take everything, that group that I'm working with, I have to take all of that and present it in such a way that I know it's palatable and not always confrontational. That's the other thing. I think that sometimes the persons who think that scholars don't want to be part of the church we enter like we're going to war with each other. We don't understand we have the same goal. What we have to work on is how can we do this? And it doesn't matter if I get credit for it, as long as it gets done. I was taught that early in ministry. I have to think that when I have an idea, is it more important that the idea takes place or that my name is on it? I have come to understand that I have other avenues to have my name on stuff, which is why I write. But at a practical level, in a church, when I see something, I may say, you know, I was thinking about this. Maybe if we tried this, and if somebody goes and tries it and it works, I'm not going to say, but that's my idea. I'm going for the greater good. It's an ethical principle, right? I'm going for the greater good. As long as it gets done, that's what's important to me. And I can do my copyrighted work over here. And the Bible says something about casting pearls before swine. So if people want to take my idea, I'm fine. Because I can take it and write about it someplace else. I can teach it in a classroom. I can evaluate somebody's work. I evaluate my own work. But there's always an outlet. But I think sometimes we narrow things so much in the church, we demonize each other without understanding we're doing the same work with different language.
Wow. You know, to see, I wish we could charge people. You just gave a free lesson on this. So y'all who are watching this, you didn't have to fly to the conference. You didn't have to show up anywhere. You just got a lesson right there from one of our master teachers in our Zion. Well, Doc, so you've hinted at some of these things, but what's next for you now that your term as an active general officer has ended? What's next for you in your life, your personal life, and academia?
Okay, so I always laugh when people say, what are you going to do now? You're retiring. This is not my whole job. I will continue as the academic dean at Candler School of Theology. I can teach as long as I want to, as long as I can think and act and do these other kinds of things. I have 4 books that I put on the shelf for the last 5 years because I was doing some other work in the church. My preaching calendar is set 3 years out so far. I have the to finish off the compelling preaching grant because I'm the grant manager. So I'll still be resourcing the church when the church wants me to do that. I'm working with the Progressive Baptist, the AME Zion, and the CME Church, and now a couple of other groups that have compelling preaching grants to help them. So I'm being a consultant there. I also have 2 more classes to finish my Juris Masters. And so I'll take one this semester and one next semester, and I'll graduate in May. I was supposed to graduate 2 years ago, but the academic dean stuff got in the way. So I'll finish my Juris Masters, and I will work on, I'm in conversation with people to do consulting work on healthcare advocacy because I'm majoring in healthcare law. Healthcare advocacy, particularly for Black women over the ages of 60, because we live longer. Nothing about Black men, but I'm just saying this is the reality of the stats. To help them understand how laws are made, how we're left out of healthcare law, to be able to stand up for themselves and ask questions. So I'm working with nurses and healthcare professionals for us to do that kind of work. And a couple of people have asked me to, because I'm coming at it from a faith standpoint, because sometimes we hyper spiritualize things and we die for it because we don't go and take care of our bodies. So I'm doing that kind of work. So that's in a couple of years. And so I'll continue to work in my guilds, the American Academy of Religion, Society to Study Black Religion, Academy of Homiletics, those kinds of things. And I have a 2.5-year-old grandson, so I'm working to have some time with him. And I've been asked by some other denominations to do some consulting work with them also. So if the AME Church would have me, I'll continue to work with the AME Church in various areas. So, and I will be a retired general officer. So Richard Allen Lewis has told me that I will show up to meetings. And so I'm still available. If people want, I'm at the stage in my life that I don't force, I've never done this, but I don't think retirement means you die. I think retirement means you recalibrate. Bishop John Richard Bryant is a perfect example of that. I think it's you recalibrate. Bishop McKenzie, you recalibrate. And so I'll continue to work ecumenically. I've been asked to be a consultant on some projects in other denominations or to do some residencies there. So I'll be doing those kinds of things going forward, and hopefully get these books out that have been sitting around waiting to be published.
Wow. And just the fact that you have been able to have influence in, you listed PNBC, AME, AME Zion, CME. You have brought them resources, and I know they give you credit. The whole AME Zion meeting, you could be forgiven for AME Zion. I thought it was the Teresa Fry Brown show when I walked over there, because your photos all over the place. People were like, oh my gosh, this woman just changed my life. And when I found out it was you, I said to myself, I hope that we in the AME Church understand just who this woman is. So at least in the space of the Christian Recorder Dialogues, we understand who you are, and we are thankful for what you've done for this church, what you have done for us, for me particularly, and we know that you have many more things to do. So Dr. T, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Do you have any final words you'd like to share with us before we wrap?
I don't. I thank you very much for this time. It's been I jokingly told my kids that I was doing the first leg of my retirement tour. I love the idea of the AME Church. I love the history and the foundation of the AME Church. I don't think that we become a quadrennial theme. I think that we do the work. And when people say that the church is failing, I said, no, I go to small churches. I go to people that are doing the work day in and day out. They love what they're doing, but more importantly, they love God. And someplace it says the gates of hell will not prevail. And so I'm very optimistic about the future of the church. I'm very optimistic about things that can be done after I leave the department. The general officers are creatives. They are people who love the church. And I just want part of that to be recognized. That's very important to me. Bishop McKenzie asked me a question once, I'll say this about being a general officer. I pray that the work that I've done has not been a detriment to the church, and that going forward, the beauty of the church is raised above partisan politics, that the beauty of being in a connection in the biblical sense is that we recognize that we got to help each other, and that we don't always have to brag about who we are, because what is the thing about people don't remember what you said to them, they remember what you did for them. That's what I want, is what I've done for the church to be recognized. And all the accolades and all the awards come from people outside of the church. I've never tried to be a threat to the church, ever, ever, ever. And if that's how people recognize me, I'm okay with it, because God always, I used to tell people when I go preach someplace and I get $5 and a piece of chicken, I don't worry about it, because God always supplies another place that I get limousines and $10,000. And so that's the way I feel about work, is I don't have to be recognized here, but God has some place for me. And ultimately, if I please God at the end of the day, I don't really care about what human beings think. If I please God at the end of my life, that's what I want. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Fry Brown, and thank you for sharing your time with us. We know it's valuable, but we wanted to take time to honor you as you retire from this place, but not from the ministry that you have in the church. Well, thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will see you again on another edition of the Christian Reporter Dialogue.